Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson at Southeastern 16 here to break down one of the more interesting teams for the college football season, the LSU Tigers, who were sort of disappointing last year, but very exciting and very interesting heading into 2024, Chase.
Yeah, last year was one of those years where you had the Heisman Trophy winner. Usually that translates to a deep postseason run. That was not the case last year for LSU. Yeah, they had a great offense, but the defense really set that team back last year. So they're looking to make corrections, and I believe they've done some good things to help with that. We'll talk about that after I talk about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head over to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or play one of the 150 slots games that they have. You can head over to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. That is promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV. Bet Online, the game starts here.
Chase, I think we usually start with the quarterback and the skill positions, but I think if you're LSU, when you got potential first-round tackles, and I mean, Will Campbell could be 1-1 overall, manning things, and you got Garrett Dellenger in between who's getting some all-SEC run, I think your discussion starts with the offensive line, because if you can protect your quarterback, a lot of good stuff can happen. And they got some they got some skill dudes who can go get it. We'll get to those in a minute. But I think, to me, the headliner is those tackles.
Yeah, and when you have a quarterback situation like they do now, they have a good quarterback, but he definitely doesn't have experience as past quarterbacks have had at LSU. So yeah, you got to have a strong offensive line, and I think that's a really strong part of the tackles you mentioned there for LSU. That is definitely a strong point, as there are several strong points on this offense for LSU. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it and you look at the guys on the line, I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing. Will Campbell, you mentioned Garrett Dellenger as well. They've played a lot of games. Campbell has played a lot of games. You look at Emory Jones over on the right side. He's played a lot of games all around on this line, or at least on the tackles. They've played a lot of football, and I think that's really going to show come, especially mid-season when you're in the kind of a tough part of the schedule. You'll be able to see that these guys have experience.
Yeah, sometimes you take your lumps with freshmen. You look back to what Brian Kelly did a couple of years ago, starting those guys right off the bat. And there were some tough days. I remember that Tennessee game, but now's when you reap the benefit of those things. And nobody in the country is going to be better set at the tackle spots. Oh, by the way, Miles Frazier, not a guy that probably gets talked about a lot, but he started all 13 games. He returns to start inside at guard, presumably right guard. So there's that too. I guess the next question is the quarterback spot, where Garrett Nussmeier has kind of sat in the shadow of Jayden Daniels for a couple of years. Of course, everybody was going to sit in that shadow a year ago as he won the Heisman. But Nussmeier, in the spots we've seen, has been really good. Seems like a super mature kid. Now, the issue is running. Yeah. He rushed for -1 yards last year. That's a massive difference from Jayden Daniels, but brings some different things to the table. And I think that's a starting point at quarterback, even if he is not a mobile guy that most teams would happily trade places with.
Well, he's got a great arm. He can sling the ball. We saw what he was able to do in the ReliaQuest Bowl. Went over Wisconsin. He started that game for LSU and threw for 395 yards, led that 98-yard game-winning drive. And so he's your classic pocket passer quarterback, and they'll be able to win games because of that. He can stand back there. He can throw. We talked about the offensive line a second ago. That's definitely going to play into their benefit. But his arm is so strong, and I really like he's got great targets, but he sees the field really well to get it to those targets. So, yeah, he's kind of been sitting back waiting his turn at quarterback. He's been able to learn under some really good quarterbacks, like you said. And I think we're going to see that this year, even though, yeah, he's not going to run the ball. like Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels was able to get them out of some tough situations because of his legs. They were able to stay in games because of his presence on the field. Well, I think they can do that with Garrett Nussmeier. It's just going to look different. And Joe Sloan stepping in, leading the offense, and calling the plays for LSU, I think will be huge. I think they're going to work well together, and I think they're going to center the offense around his strengths and not try to make him do what he can't do. But I love his arm, and I think he's going to have a great year this year. I really do.
Yeah, good job by Brian Kelly to keep Joe Sloan on staff, give him a promotion. I know there was some sniffing around by some teams about wanting him as a coordinator, but the skill positions, Chase, kind of interesting. And by the way, before we leave quarterback, A.J. Swan is now their backup. He was a starter off and on for Vanderbilt for 2 years. Arm talent there. It seemed like as the competition got better and the career progressed, the performance got worse, but there is some talent there. The receivers, it's not the room they had last year when they had a couple of first rounders. Now, look, they do have Mason Taylor, who's a stud at tight end, but they do have a lot of guys that played a lot of ball. There were top 100 recruits that now will get a chance. Shelton Sampson, Chris Hilton, both guys that kind of fit that bill. They got Aaron Anderson, who was a former 5-star recruit by at least one service when he was at Alabama. He'll presumably start in the slot, although Zavion Thomas, the Mississippi State transfer, is going to give him some competition. And Kyren Lacy, who I guess everybody is sort of pegged as the next big guy there.
Yeah, I've read is great things about Kyren Lacy and kind of the breakout season that he potentially could have in this offense, and I definitely see that could be the case. I really like just from the highlights and clips that I've seen of him, but I'm looking forward to seeing Kaleb Jackson as well, the running back. I've heard nothing but good things about him, and just through the spring and watching some highlights, they're going to have a strong running game this year because like we just made note, Nussmeier is not going to run like Jaden Daniels did, so therefore you need to have a strong running game, and I think that starts with Kaleb Jackson, Josh Williams, also in that running back room, and I think he's going to be a guy to watch this year as well. But with Jackson and Williams, I think both of those guys are set up to have really good years, and I think they're guys you want back there. They're strong runners, and I really like where this running back room is. Again, it's not really big names, and there's not a ton of guys who are going to get touches, but Jackson and Williams both, I think, will be huge for the run game for LSU.
All right, defense gets a reboot with Blake Baker, who did wonders at Missouri in a couple of years. And we know LSU's had the talent. The performance was poor last year by LSU standards. I think in the conference play, their numbers were worse than anybody's not named Vanderbilt. A lot of that had to do with the secondary. You hear Brian Kelly talk about it. He will blame a lot of it just on, I don't know if it's pre-snap reads or execution, but things along those lines. I'll be very interested to see what Baker can do with this bunch.
Well, last year they allowed 416.6 yards per game and 28 points per game. I mean, you can't win games with those numbers. And so they're kind of having to rebuild this defense. And that's a tough task to do that in one off season. But what they have done, I like. Of course, you got Harold Perkins, who it definitely helps to have him back there, and they'll move him back to the inside linebacker position. Greg Penn he had 89 tackles last year. He was pretty reliable for those guys, and so I think there was so much they had to do to correct the defense, but I think getting Blake Baker was a great start. And then the fact you have Harold Perkins coming back, I think that's really good. And so, it may be one of those things where we have to wait and see, do all these changes that we see they did in the offseason, does it translate to better play? We'll have to wait and see. But when you look at it on paper, yes, it does, so I think it is they've made improvements that they needed to make. I like Major Burns in that star position. He had 93 tackles last year. I think it's good to have him back. He's got a lot of experience. And some younger guys I think are going to be ready to shine too on this defense.
Obviously, everybody in the football world knows about Harold Perkins. And then Major Burns, if you consider him a linebacker, he's also kind of gotten some all SEC type run. So I think they're very interesting there. The question I have is the rest of them. Like, we're used to LSU having, consensus first team All-Americans at tackle or somebody at end. We're used to having them have, future Thorpe Award safeties, stuff like that. It's just not on paper. I say on paper, we don't know. Maybe some of these kids, because they're still getting high-level recruits, right? They've still got some top 150 guys at those position groups, but it's not that LSU talent we've gotten accustomed to in the front four and in the back four.
Yeah, and that's something that is it a concern? I think we'll just have to wait and see when it comes to play on the field. But yeah, you look at the defensive line, and you've got to wonder, did they make enough? Because that's where it all starts. I mean, if your defensive line is not strong, gets whooped up and down the field every Saturday, then it's going to be a long year. You've got to have a good, strong front on the defense. That's where it's all starting. So they really need production here. They really need some guys to step up. Will it be these guys? We'll just have to wait and see. But I think Zavion Jones, Jacoby, and Guillory, those are two guys you want on your team and you want on your front line. And they've got those guys. And so I think those are two really bright spots. Jalen Lee as well. These guys have been on the team, and they've played some good games, they've some meaningful games. And so I think it's just going to be so important, kind of the defensive front setting the tone for the rest of the defense. Can they do that? Did they make enough corrections there on the defensive line to see a difference this year? We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, secondary interesting too. That's where they struggled last year. Zy Alexander played okay when he played. He's getting some preseason all SEC run. Wasn't healthy the whole year. Sage Ryan's been there a long time. Jordan Gilbert is an interesting addition. He didn't do much at A&M a year ago. He played twice, I think, because he was hurt. But 2 years ago, had a couple of picks, 4 passes defended. I think was a full-time starter for them. So that's a guy they get where they get some experience. You've got some guys that have played ball, I think, in the secondary. The question may become at that other corner where I guess Ashton Stamps could start. He was a guy that wasn't a super highly regarded guy at a high school last year, but played a lot for them. I'll be interested to see how it all sticks together, but do have some experience here.
Yeah, and that's a bonus. I mean, anytime you've played in games and have some experience, that's going to help. And I think last year they didn't have much experience coming back, and we saw the problems. But these guys were part of that. They're learning from that, and so Ashton Stamps is going to need to step up on the corner. Zy Alexander is got the other corner locked down, and he's a great player. And so again, I think the corrections that they've been making, on defense are good, but they're just going to need these guys to step up and show some of this experience, really.
Chase, special teams, big addition for the Tigers. They added Zavion Thomas, the transfer from Mississippi State, who's pretty good punt returner and kickoff returner. He'll be one of the best in the leagues. The rest of it, Damian Ramos is just kind of, he's okay. He kicks really well at home. I think he hit all his field goals at home last year, was 55, 57 on point afters. And then Peyton Todd, who barely played last year, will be their punter. I don't know that there's much to talk about there, but the Thomas edition will be interesting.
It will, yeah. That will definitely be interesting to watch. Damian Ramos, you mentioned, he made 12 of 15 field goal attempts last year, I think. But I mean, special teams is something that, and just talking with Matt Moscona a couple of months ago, he said that's something to watch this year. Is special teams, and if they can find some consistency there, they've struggled in that. under Brian Kelly in recent years. So, I think that's something to watch. Can they get some consistency on special teams?
Yeah. Be interesting to see how the Tigers do this year. Some interesting things on the schedule. We're not going to get to those today because we're going to cover those in another video. I think we did some analysis of LSU's schedule and our eyes got big. We looked at a couple things. We'll save that for another video, but and tease that a little bit. But any parting thoughts on the Tigers on the way out?
I think, it depends on the defense this year. I mean, I think when you look at the roster, they could be a playoff team. I think they're a borderline playoff team. There's no doubt because, again, they've got a lot of good production on offense. They're losing the Heisman Trophy winner, but I think Garrett is primed to have a good year. I think they're going to have to adjust the offense. They can't expect him to be Jaden Daniels. And so if they can kind of play to his strengths and what he's good at, I think the offense will be good because they do have really good skill guys around him. But I think this whole season is based off the defense. I'm not worried about their offense. Again, I think they're going to be all right, but they have got to have a complete 180 on defense from what they had last year so they can compete in games. I mean, we saw in Brian Kelly's first year, they were playing for an SEC championship against Georgia. They beat Alabama, was able to win the West. But last year, just they could have won so many games if they had had a defense. And I think that was their goal in the offseason, obviously. And I think they've made good strides in being successful at that. But again, we'll just have to wait and see, how good of corrections they made. But I like what they did in the offseason. But again, I think this whole season is kind of based on what this defense can do.
Yeah, I'm mostly with you. I'm not really worried about that offense. Again, you don't have some of the proven playmakers at receiver you had a year ago, but they'll figure it out. And I trust Nussmeier. And then when you got those things at the tackles that they've got, that gives you an advantage. Most people don't know. What you lose is when it's 3rd and 8 and there's nothing there. The stuff that Jaden Daniels could do for you to keep a game alive. That's something that could hurt them in a spot. But if the defense develops, if they're better in the secondary, if they get something more out of the defensive line, then look out. I think LSU is a playoff contender. We'll talk about the Tigers throughout the season and much more. We cover SEC football, baseball, and basketball every week, wall to wall here at Southeastern 16. So subscribe if you haven't. Give us a like, tell a friend. That helps us out. Thank you for watching us here at Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.